2016. You're watching Bottomline East Africa this Wednesday. Thank you very much for joining us. You can see the hashtag on your screen, Bottomline EA. Please do feel free to get in touch with us. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. We have lots lined up for you. A discussion on that 4-day special hearing, public hearing at the East Africa Legislative Assembly in Arusha on the unfolding crisis in Burundi. We'll also be discussing the humanitarian crisis as well that's unfolding in the Central African Republic, with all the details of the alleged LRA attack in that country, as well as much, much more. And good news, if you're a follower of the Grammys, Zinzi Kibiku has that special report for us. Let's take a look at our highlights tonight. Seeking solutions. The East African Legislative Assembly begins public hearings on the Burundi crisis. Tension in Darfur. 6 people killed in fresh violence as Sudan settles on a referendum date for the troubled region. Connie strikes again. The Lord's Resistance Army blamed for abducting of the Central African Republic. So we start off with our top story on the show today, and it's what's unfolding at the East African Legislative Assembly that has commenced a 4-day workshop in Arusha, Tanzania, to discuss the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Burundi. The forum is intended to review a petition presented on the matter by the Pan-African Lawyers Union in November last year. The findings of the public hearing workshop will be crucial as the East African region pushes for peace in the country, which has not known peace since April last year. Here's Lilian Odera with the rest of the details.
The decision by the East African Legislative Assembly to hold a 4-day public hearing workshop on Burundi is the latest effort by the regional body to avert a possible full-blown genocide in the country, which has been ravaged by violence since April last year.
Tumefika Arusha leo hii kusikiliza petition ambayo imeletwa na watu wa Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki, asasi na taasisi sio za kiserikali, kuhusu masuala na machafuko ambayo yanaendelea nchini Burundi.
The workshop comes hot on the heels of a petition presented at the Assembly on November 25th last year by the Pan-African Lawyers Union, demanding for more action from the member states to restore peace in Burundi.
Tumepata barua rasmi kutoka serikali ya Burundi kituambia kwamba itaweza kuja kuzungumza na sisi baada ya tarehe 18 mwezi huu. Sasa maamuzi yetu kama kamati ni kuwasikiliza wengine wote, alafu tutapanga tarehe mwafaka baada ya tarehe 18 ambayo tutawapa fursa serikali ya Burundi kuja kusema upande wake.
During the 4-day public seminar, the Assembly's Regional Affairs and Conflict Resolution Committee will also establish the facts regarding the humanitarian atrocities committed in Burundi and which the lawyers had presented to the Assembly. The key participants at the seminar are the Conflict Resolution Committee members, government officials, and representatives from the country's wrangling political parties and the Pan-African Union lawyers, who are the main petitioners. This development comes barely a day after Uganda's Defense Minister, Cyrus Kionga, who is also the mediator, persuaded the two warring factions to get back to the negotiating table after the government side pulled out of the talks. Lilian Odera, KTN News.
All right, so let's find out a little bit more about this session that entered its first day today, and we'd like to speak to the Honorable Abdullah Muni, whom you saw in that news clip. He's the chair of the Regional Affairs and Conflict Resolution Committee at the East African Legislative Assembly. Honorable Muni, thank you for joining us on the show today. Let's start by talking about, give us a rundown of what is expected at this 4-day workshop.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. It's a pleasure to be on the show. What is expected is that after the House or the Speaker has instructed our committee, the Regional Affairs and Conflict Resolution Committee, to sit and receive the petition from the petitioners and to review and involve all the stakeholders in Burundi, namely the government, political parties, civil society organizations, to listen to them, to review what comes through, and to interrogate and ultimately get a report and submit it before the House for discussions and resolutions to be passed. Our aim, the end in mind, the aim is not to alienate anybody in this process. Our aim is to ensure that what is happening in Burundi, one, receives the proper platform to be aired, but two, to bring the parties to a situation whereby we can stop the atrocities that are taking place, and we can facilitate a discussion whereby we'll get a conclusion that is satisfactory for all parties, namely peace and security in Burundi.
Okay, and you've talked a bit about the outcome or expected outcomes of the forum, but I wonder what your comment would be, because in the press briefing that was sent out, this is apparently in response to a petition that was raised by the Pan-African Lawyers Union that was submitted to the Legislative Assembly in November last year on the matter. So many saying, did it have to take intervention of the Lawyers Union for the Legislative Assembly to discuss this?
Absolutely not. There has been a lot of intervention, behind the scenes intervention, through the legislative arm of the East African community. But under the treaty, we're obligated to receive any petition. And most of our interventions have been behind the scenes. The situation is sensitive. Matters are of grave concern. But at the same time, what we want to achieve is not to alienate or aggravate the situation any further. So a lot of the interventions have been behind the scenes. This has brought it out because under the treaty, any citizen of East Africa can bring a petition before the House on any matters pertaining to the integration process or matters that are important to the integration process. So the Pan-African Lawyers Union, together with Kituo cha Katiba, East African Civil Society Organizations Forum, the East African Law Society, Atrocities Watch Africa, and Center for Citizen Participation on African Union jointly brought this petition, which we are responding to under our mandate of the treaty.
You talk about some interventions behind the scenes. Perhaps you could give us some specifics about that, for our viewers across East Africa to understand specifically what the Legislative Assembly has been trying to do behind the scenes.
What has been happening is that we just like yourself, have seen what is unfolding before our eyes, and we have brought, because we deal with the Council of Ministers, who are part of our assembly, who are ex-official members. We have been speaking to them behind the scenes to inquire as to what is happening, what can be done, what intervention can we seek. As a parliament, the most we can do is to influence an outcome through our proximity and the levers that we have within the parliament itself to deal with the personnel of government. But beyond that, we don't have any more powers to do any other thing other than to seek influence behind the scenes to ensure that what is happening desists and the parties come to the table and come to an amicable or workable solution with what is pertaining on the ground.
All right. How easy or difficult do you think it'll be for you to be able to, exert some sort of influence or pressure over this matter, especially considering that Burundi itself wants its own representatives to the East African Legislative Assembly to quit EALA? You do know about the letter from the Speaker of the Burundi National Assembly that asked for 4 of its members from the country to return home and not be part of that. So I wonder to what extent your influence can go if there are no representatives of Burundi at EALA.
Well, first and foremost, there was an attempt, that's correct. But the treaty stipulates that there is a security of tenure for members. So a member once elected to the assembly, there are very limited grounds for removal. So none of those attempted removals will succeed. That being said, we're optimistic. I'm an optimist, and I believe that whenever there's a challenge, what we need to do is to air out the issues, be objective in how to deal with it, and not alienate any side of this conflict, so as to get an opportunity to find a way in settling it as quickly as possible, and to prevent any further abuses of human rights that have been reported to have been happening in Burundi recently.
Okay, Honorable Muni, I'd just like your thoughts on the talks, because obviously that's something I imagine would come up heavily over the next 3 days that are left of this workshop, of the talks in Uganda. And we know they were to resume in Arusha on the 5th of this month. And we know about the push and pull about who will sit on the table. You know, the Burundi government and Pierre Nkurunziza saying he will not sit on the same table with the alleged coup plotters, you know, who allegedly took part in that coup last year. Just your thoughts on how the talks have gone so far, and perhaps your suggestions and ideas as to how to negotiate table.
I cannot comment on the talks, because what I know is no more than what you know, and what I've heard from the media reports and statements from the chair of council recently in Arusha. But what I'm saying is that it is impossible to deal with any conflict, without both parties or all parties, or without being inclusive in who sits around the table. I believe within the purview of the Uganda mediator, I believe that all parties will ultimately come to the table, because I don't believe anyone wants this to escalate any further. Everyone is trying to look for a route to come to a conclusion to ensure that Burundi falls back into peace. But I'm very optimistic that I believe the powers that be within the East African community purview will bring all parties to the table, and I feel that progress will be made.
What do you think about the AU resolution, you know, about sending in, you know, troops to ensure cessation of the violence and the hostilities there? Of course, that's still awaiting formal acceptance or not from the United Nations Security Council. Pierre Nkurunziza has been very categorical that he will not allow these forces in, because on the one hand we're talking about having, you know, talks and everybody on the table. I guess everybody trying to explore as many options as possible to restore peace. But, you know, your thoughts on that resolution by the AU, do you think that is something that would be worth considering, sending in forces?
Personally, I don't believe that is the way to go at this particular point in time. Our region has a history. If you go back to 1994 in Rwanda, and what happened in Rwanda, and the slow pace at which the international community responded to, I believe what is happening now is a reaction with that in mind. That, you know, what happened 20 years ago I'm not equating both situations to be exactly equal, but may happen today. So the AU responded in a manner that they